In the last episode of Wacky Skelly Mad Adventures, I completed the main game as Merton, meaning I persistently used the fire poker and Merton's armor set. The armor, of course, has literally zero defensive stats. The fire poker, meanwhile, well, has shit durability and does later on deal highly questionable damage. However, ultimately the main game wasn't that big of a challenge. So today I'll be taking this Calcium Connoisseur to the DLCs, where the enemies are tougher, more numerous, and status effects are much more consequential. Yeah, and of course I'm playing in hardcore, meaning that having my boat scattered about by an enemy will roll a dice that, with a 1 to 5 chance, will decide that I will have to rejoin my skeleton friends in a skeleton grave, deleting my save file permanently. Before we start, subscribe, because otherwise I'll delete your save file permanently. Can I even say that? I don't know. Fucking, let's just start. Via the allegedly, possibly boneless supremacists Sarborian and Boog, I arrived in Harmattan, where the Forge Master announced his maniacally evil plan to raise the city to the ground, for low reasons, but we ain't no nerds, we're here to beat the shit out of him. So with all the underground dungeons opened up, I first went into the living quarters, completely forgetting that that area is now entirely optional. Upon my realization that I had just wasted about 10 minutes of my life, or death, I moved on to the next dungeon. There I did some repairing and preparing, as the Lightning J Dancer had in previous playthroughs been quite an obstacle. However, despite my ghost buddy aptly displaying the fact that in death you're naturally brain dead, Infused Wind cheesed the shit out of this guy. So with the most difficult enemy in the area defeated, I very easily acquired the warehouse key and moved on to the manufacturing facility. The Greater Grotesque posed very little challenge, so I got my first gemstone key and headed off to the warehouse next. The entire dungeon is completely infested with Immaculates, which, as I'm an epic pro gamer, were not but a minor inconvenience. Well, until there were two, but that's not fair anyways. They're cheating, and here I apparently refuse to use a large health potion. It's been a while since I've recorded this footage, so I'm really not too sure what the thought process was behind that, but regardless, I made my way to the first boss encounter in this DLC, the Titanic Guardian MK7. Before you start the fight, you of course have to choose which elements he is weaker to, what weapon he uses, and what environment he's in. I chose the Ghostly Wendigo Matrix, which reduces his fire resistance, the 10-ton hammer, as that's the only option you should ever consider, or so I decided 5 years ago and have not reconsidered ever since, and the ice vents, as that option barely matters regardless. And, well, what can I say? That is video game footage on your screens right at this very moment. Look at this shit. Infused Wind completely fucked him up. He didn't stand a fucking chance. It's depressing, really. I came here for a challenge, right? A fucking challenge. But these wankers, even in the DLC, they're too fucking weak, too pathetic to stand up to my imposing, dense, and calcified structure. Fucking hell, leave me alone. And so, with the second gemstone key acquired, the test chambers were up next, and naturally, while my singeing rod did quite well in the ice part of the dungeon, in the fire part I yet again saw the pearly gates of heaven bravely glistering before my mind's eye, yet they were too elusive and ephemeral, as I am simply too fucking good at the video game to die. No shot these morons were even dangerous in the slightest. I did it for the content, you gotta understand. And so I got the key and opened the gates, allowing me to take the train over to the loading docks. There, the second boss awaited me. I again summoned my minion, and yet again he was too mentally stunted to do anything. Not that it mattered, as again, this guy was a fucking joke. Like, not only did I stun lock the shit out of him, but even with the parasite detached, I didn't really take a lot of damage. I feel like this run may be too easy. Second to last stop, Mana Transfer Station. The horrors really weren't a big of a deal, the Chromatic Elemental wasn't either, and finally, my ghost buddy justified his place in my skill lineup by distracting the Shell Horror just long enough for me to kill the Pure Illuminator, and so I had obtained all 4 gemstone keys, and was already on my way to the laboratory to beat the shit out of the Rust Lich. Fucking hell! Well, that was a little slipper, but since I have Infused Wind, surely the Rust Lich will be a complete fucking joke, as all bosses have been. What the fuck do you mean 7000% impact resistance? And not to mention, the majority of this fight consists of killing the continuously resurrecting golems, which, mind you, isn't a big problem with a nice, huge two-handed weapon, but if you're using such an inadequately sized stick like me, and on top of that have barely any impact resistance, well, you might imagine the pain this fight caused me. Without exaggeration, no shits, no giggles. This fight was the most obnoxious experience I've ever had in this game. Even having your backpack spontaneously eject itself from the universe in earlier versions of the game was more fucking fun than this. Come on, come on. Oh, what the fucking hell? I was this fucking close to having a stroke there. That was horrific. Well, on the bright side, I had now finished the first DLC, and surely it couldn't get any worse than the Rust Lich. Right? Well, I went on to almost immediately fucking die in Enmekar, but we're gonna ignore that. More importantly, I spent what felt like an eternity in the Cabal of Wind's Temple Penitentiary, grinding out a shit ton of horror weapons, which I sold to Levant for fat stacks of cash, which realistically would nowhere near suffice for the three brothers, but whatever, we ball. And so, probably prepared enough, and with a slight stain visible on my pants, I entered the caldera. The temperatures are high, the enemies too. In terms of damage, health, and methamphetamine, they inflict whack-ass status effects and dots that make short work of unprotected boners. On the other hand, unlike with Rust and Vengeance, which offered me 0 useful rewards, the new Sirocco questline will give me the option to obtain several new skills and other build improvements to which I'll get at the relevant time. First, I had to head over to Old Sirocco, saw a man comically tumble into a pit of lava and set up a camp in the newly established New Sirocco. Wasting no time at all, I then built the necessary buildings. I truly am the modern-day Shakespeare, some might call me the Goethe of outward content, effervescently weaving together concepts unimaginable to the mere mortal. I then slaughtered the local Myrmidon population, also laboriously taking out their queen in a 3-way gangbang which allowed me to take her eggs. Why do these guys want them? I don't know, presumably protein. Speaking of eggs, I then entered the sulfur caverns and stomped out some snakes to get access to the fucking stink water or whatever. With that quest completed, I had now unlocked the ability to erect specialized buildings. I of course had to get the city hall going first, and then also got the general store and gladiator arena. The general store offered me one singular thing I wanted, that being the Brigand backpack. This backpack, while having large capacity and not allowing for the attachment of lanterns, doesn't inhibit dodges, and most importantly increases physical damage by 15%. Now, that wasn't a massive bonus considering I dealt, well, 14 physical damage, but it was a bonus nonetheless. Then, as for the Gladiators Arena, with a later upgrade, I would of course be able to unlock either the Specialist or the Weapon Master. The Specialist doesn't have any passive I even remotely cared about, so I will later on go with the Weapon Master and get Dispersion, the usefulness of which is highly questionable compared to some other options available to other weapons. But whatever, a new skill is a new skill, I guess. However, to build any of these in the first place, I needed the necessary samples, so I did the Steamed Bath Tunnels, Grotto of Chalcedony, and Old Sirocco for some loot and materials. And with that, I was finally able to build the buildings, after which I had to get the fucking stone charged. This was fucking shit. The backpack of course prohibits proper dodging, and since I had no armor, any amount of hits landed on me would not only result in damage done to my tender bones, but also in the breaking of said bones, leading me to stagger, and since I wouldn't be able to dodge, I would in all likelihood not get up again. So to get past the horses without getting completely fucked in the arse, I devised a unique and ingenious plan, if I do say so myself. I lured the nearby snail over to them and got fucking lucky. Ignoring to what extent my success was deserved and justified with skill, I completed the quest, but instead of continuing with the third, I instead left for Enmekar to get some more horror weapons, and then to the Cursed Knees, and more specifically, the Ghost Pass. The reason being is that for the third quest, I'd have to face the Djinn, who is completely and entirely immune to fire damage and decently immune to physical. Wait, what? Decently? That doesn't make any fucking sense. Naturally, that would result in me doing no fucking damage, especially if he's decently immune to physical, so I decided to finally enchant my fire poker with Poltergeist. Poltergeist replaces 50% of your weapon's physical damage with raw damage. Usually, that actually decreases your damage ceiling, as there's many ways to buff physical damage, and these buffs of course get significantly less mileage that way. But of course I did pathetically low physical damage regardless, so being able to guarantee at least some damage to pass through resistances would present a net positive. Also, and hugely importantly for this run, Poltergeist adds self-repair to the weapon, which against both the Djinn and Crimson Arbiter would make these presumably prolonged fights much more pleasant, as the Roslich so aptly demonstrated. I forgot the fucking incenses. No, I was back in Sirocco, built some more housing to artificially create sparsity and inflate prices later on, and got both the arena and weapon master upgrade built. I then fought 3 enemies in the arena to acquire Dispersion. Dispersion is a long-winded, close-ranged attack that deals damage not with jack shit and decreases your stability to 0, meaning that should you get hit within the animation or sometime after, you will, to put it bluntly, get fucked. Now, the upside is that very similarly to Gong Strike, if you have an infusion on your weapon, Dispersion has some extra effects. It overrides the damage of the attack entirely to whatever element is on your weapon and applies the corresponding hex onto the enemy. However, I of course most often used Infuse Wind. It's the best infusion in the game after all. And with Gong Strike, that's no problem. You get a special interaction that results in no damage dealt, but in return, infinite impact damage. And with Dispersion, you get that same interaction. What? Wait, what? That's right, with Dispersion, the Wind Imbue is counted as an ethereal infusion, and as such you deal ethereal damage, which isn't too bad, but you also of course inflict Haunted, which for one I could inflict with my Bone Shield regardless, but much more pressingly was completely and utterly fucking worthless to me. Did I completely waste my fucking time? No? Yes. Yes, I did. Whatever, man. Well, regardless, due to reasons which I am entirely aware of but will not divulge, I was headed to the Ark. Ark of the Covenant? Dude, that's my favorite Indiana Jones movie. Write in the comments what your favorite Indiana Jones movie is. There, the nobleman gave birth to a Scarlet Emissary. Oh, how beautiful Mother Nature is, and I gained the ability to properly face the Djinn. So, in the oil refinery, I both buffed up and oiled up for the first phase, which I took care of pretty easily. I then also took the opportunity to oil up again for the second phase, and this was actually reasonably tough, as the Djinn in his second phase gains an immunity to confusion, meaning that he is significantly more difficult to stun lock to death. Worry not, however, because I am unfathomably good at this video game. I defeated him without trouble nonetheless. With that quest also taken care of, I then built a chapel and a water purifier. Both of these I've never actually gone with before, but in this run, with a blacksmith for example being utterly worthless, they turn out to be quite good options. The water purifier gives you access to a much improved stamina regen effect, and with a later upgrade, HP regen as well, and they can coexist, meaning I'd get noticeably better survivability. The chapel has a similar purpose, as you can, in exchange for coin, of course God only likes you if you're rich, get a buff that grants you barrier, and with an upgrade also status resistance. Well, all that building resulted in my funds being as drained as... I'm not gonna finish that sentence. You decide what is drained of what. I will not be held accountable for whatever abhorrence could be said here. My point was, I did some more farming. Whoopee! Now a negligible amount less impoverished, I started the final quest. Before I was headed off for the final dungeon though, I did also learn Infuse Blood. It adds a small amount of decay damage, adds extreme poison and bleeding, but most importantly, gives you 10% life steal. Now, usually that's more than enough to fully sustain you by itself. However, since the Imbue's damage buff isn't particularly good, if you're, like me, still using an early game weapon, the effects of that lifesteal effect are significantly diminished to the point that Infused Blood really was much use to me. Also, well, all the enemies in the Scarlet Sanctuary being immune to dots didn't really help. So, instead of doing any more yapping, in the burrow hidden beneath the now ascended meteor, the final boss laid in wait. The Crimson Avatar has annoyingly high resistances to both physical and fire, has an unusually complex moveset, and deals damage very befitting of an endgame boss. Also, he is immune to confusion, meaning that a major part of my strategy would be invalidated. However, I had a plan. But first, of course, we just had to clear the dungeon. Haha, don't be too cocky. What? No, 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 no. Surely there's only a 20% chance. It's over. Just like that. I have died. Reclaimed by the realm from which my carcass escaped. It seems that escape was only temporary. Well, guys, I couldn't beat the DLC as Muton. That's it. Video's over. Or is it? That's right, where one skeleton falls, another one arises, and so we arise from our graves like a majestic and weirdly malformed phoenix prepared to take on the cruel world yet again. Only through the skeleton hive mind we have received information from our forebears and so have learned to avoid their mistakes. This time we ignore the wild hunter. Thrallstrax is shit and Predator Leap loses edge later on due to the flat numbers. Instead we just go for the monk, this time for the complete opposite skills for much improved survivability, and the hermit, same as Teemu Merton. And by the way, I lost the footage for this. I copied it somewhere and now it's gone. We again go for the blue chamber. I did the testing. Blood of Giants is just better than all Holy Mission passives taken together, but this time we get the Lantern of Souls from a legacy chest. Instead, go for Ancestors Memories from Whispering Bones. That slightly optimizes HP and stamina for us. The final fight in Monsoon was actually much harder this time, as I had of course not done Purifier, but we still managed. We skip the Soroborians. There ain't jack shit for us there, and I already did it. I don't have to prove anything. Rather, immediately after Ancestral Peacemaker, I head to the Caldera and pick up our last class there, the Primal Ritualist. See, in my skill tree ranking, he got closer to the bottom, as what he provides is largely limited to one thing and one thing only: survivability. Sacred Fumes, 7 barrier. Battle Rhythm, 5 barrier, 5 protection. Nurturing Echo, stupid HP, stamina, mana regen, and status build-up decrease. Now, usually that's way more than anyone ever needs, however, we fucking do. We again start the Sirocco questline and again go to steal the eggs. And as you can see here, yeah, I'm not only really fucking tanky, at least for a skelly man, but also my AoE damage is so much fucking better, it's actually insane. Again, usually that's not really a problem. A two-handed weapon or heavier armor would completely negate the issue I had with AoE content, but in this case the Ritualist was a massive fucking upgrade. Also, while we're talking about offensive utility, I do of course get access to 2 new damage types, and both Ether Bomb and Holy Blaze, both of which are incredibly strong. Regardless, Snake's dead, Stinkwater acquired, new buildings built. Only this time I skipped the arena. Dispersion was of course as useful to me as information on the legal age of consent is to a Minecraft YouTuber. Instead, I immediately went for the general store, chapel, and water purifier. Of course, the questline progress still limited me, so I just got the city hall and general store built and then got my rock escort quest started. Now, instead of just rushing through and getting lucky, I had a plan this time. Looking a bit crunchy, isn't it? Well, as you may or may not have seen already, my GPU decided it had had enough of life and moved on to the next realm, presumably because some micro cracks in the PCB caused the VRAM solder to loosen, but, well, whatever the cause of my graphics card's death, I don't have one right now, and so I am not only editing but also recording the remaining footage for this video on my laptop. It is a great laptop, it is the most awesome, fantastic laptop. Look at this screen, it is a fantastic screen. However, it doesn't have a dedicated GPU, so 720p gaming, here we fucking go. Also, just as a disclaimer, my distinct lack of discrete graphics will in all likelihood persist for quite some time, so I hope you don't mind your gameplay crunchier than usual. Well, whatever, my plan was to first properly clear out the path to the charging spot, which also meant I got to fully stress test my full setup for the first time. Holy shit, the ritual list is fucking broken. Okay, well, maybe 9th place was a little harsh. So, after I had cleared the path, I got the Calcedony Stone, charged it and went back. I got some more construction done and started the quest for the Djinn, before which I also finally remembered to get Poltergeist onto my fire poker. In the Ark, I made pretty quick work of the Emissary, though I did come as clenchingly close to, upon stepping foot into the ephemeral ether, begin my quest as the Great Grover once had, to kill God. Though I'm fine, so I went to teach some manners to the fucking elephant thing. I don't know what the fuck the Djinn is supposed to be. Look at him. Fucking silly creature. The first phase was actually more challenging this time, as he kept hovering outside my totem's range, though the second phase, while not particularly quickly, was still taken care of with ease. There aren't any advanced tips I can give here. His actual melee attacks are quite easy to dodge, though his close-ranged magic can be rather troubling, so I'd suggest sticking to half range, closing in on him when you've got a parry or any other skill ready to stagger him for a good beating. After that, a fuck ton more building, and I finally got both the upgraded chapel and water purifier. Also, I went for the food store and the inn expansion, as it looks cool. Why not? There's not any other building I really cared for. So then, showtime, I guess. I slept in the inn, got a bonus functionally identical to the regular one, made Martin Luther roll in his grave, made sure to have my strongest assortment of mid-game food ready, and was headed off, hopefully for real this time, to the final dungeon. Instead of messing around with any of the obnoxious enemies, I just run past all of them to switch one lever after another, and so promptly stood in front of the gates to the Crimson Avatar. Gulp. Same things apply as previously stated. High damage, area denial, unfortunate assortment of resistances, and an immunity to both pain and confusion. However, Walmart Merton's build was much less predicated on both of these hexes as opposed to his progenitor, and so I was much more confident I'd come out on top this time. I placed the totems immediately, wasted my parry, got him to relocate into my totem's range, and managed to inflict Holy Blaze on him, as for some fucking reason he is not in fact immune to burning. Ether Bomb procced, I got Brace off for a massive punishing window, took some staff hits right to the schnozzle, but didn't worry because my whimsical little dance could patch me right back up. I also finally landed Counter Strike and did some more solid damage, and then he died very anticlimactically. And because Teemu Merton ain't raised no bitch, I went back and killed the remaining mobs. Okay, well, that is it. The DLC's done. As Merton, did the ritual list kinda kill the vibe? Yes he did, and I don't care, because without him, this would have been absolute and utter cancer. And honestly, I really quite enjoyed this run in general, but especially so the build. As I said, defensive utility is something I usually don't really value at all, as I think most armors paired with some potions and reasonably okay gameplay execution don't really leave me demanding any other buffs. So with the harshest restrictions to armor, suddenly a class I otherwise just don't need at all becomes not only optional, but optimal, and that's really nice. Also, before anyone complains the totems don't fit the rules or whatever, this one's got a skill, so I reckon that's more than good enough justification. Subscribe and like, but for real this time, I could really use some YouTube or fucking Raid Shadow Legends bucks right about now, as despite the humor to be found in 2008 Bandicam gaming, I do in fact quite like seeing what is going on my screen. Bye.